Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Mavid Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om, peace, peace, peace. And good evening. We are continuing reading from the Tales and Parables of Sri Ramakrishna. We're going to begin with Tyaga and Vairagya, renunciation and dispassion, the Homa bird.
The Vedas speak of the Homa bird. It lives very high in the sky. There the mother bird lays her eggs. She lives so high that the egg falls for many days. While falling, it is hatched. The chick continues to fall, and that goes on for many more days. In the meantime, the chick develops eyes. Coming near the earth, it becomes conscious of the world. It realizes it will meet certain death if it hits the ground. Then it gives a shrill cry and shoots up towards its mother. The earth means death, and it frightens the young bird. It then seeks its mother. She dwells high up in the sky. The young bird shoots straight up in that direction. It does not look anywhere else. Persons who are born with God consciousness realize the danger of coming in contact with the world. In their very childhood, they're afraid of the world. And their one thought is how to reach the mother and how to realize God.
Yes, and obviously the idea of the Homa bird is just a mythological example. It's not an actual bird, but the point is to have a story that illustrates how when one sees the earth as a death trap, that one then seeks the Godhead. And so metaphorically, of course, this is looking up to the mother in the sky for the bird. And so it's all a nice metaphor for this situation that we find ourselves in. For human beings, obviously, we're born right here down on the ground. And we go through a fairly lengthy childhood, but eventually some people realize that the world is a rather complex, dangerous, ensnaring place. And so we want to find God, and so we turn to spiritual practices. All right, we're going to go on to the one called Dispassion Comes Like a Flood, Never by Drops.
How does a man come to have dispassion? A wife once said to her husband, "Oh dear, I'm very anxious about my brother. For the past 1 week, he's been thinking of becoming an ascetic. He's been busy preparing for that life. He's trying to reduce gradually all his desires and wants." The husband replied, "Oh dear, be not anxious about your brother. He will never become a sannyasin. No one can become a sannyasin in that way." "Well, how does one become a sannyasin then?" asked the wife. "Just," exclaimed the husband. He tore his flowing dress to pieces. He took a piece and tied it around his loin and told his wife that she and all of her sex were henceforth mothers to him. He left the house and never returned.
So that's a rather extreme example. Somehow the man was inspired to become a sannyasin at that very moment. Now, why he chose that very moment is difficult to understand, but and the wife's brother was thinking of doing it step by step. So, but the point of the story is that generally renunciation comes all at once. It doesn't come step by step. But I think there's some other cases where that might be said to be the case, where people do gradually reduce their responsibilities, reduce their attachments, especially if one has gone through all 4 stages of life, including the householder stage. Then it comes a time when the things disappear or are shredded one at a time, and they prepare for the retired life into the forest, and then sannyas. All right, let's see. Yeah, I think we're reading this one right. Not until the illusion breaks.
The Guru said to his disciple, "The world is illusory. Come away with me." "But, revered sir," said the disciple, my people at home, my father, my mother, my wife, they love me so much. How can I give them up?" Guru said, "Oh, no doubt you now have this feeling of I and mine, and say that they love you. But this is all an illusion of your mind. I shall teach you a trick, and you will know whether they love you truly or not." In saying this, the teacher gave the disciple a pill and said to him, "Now swallow this at home, and you will appear to be a corpse, but you will not lose consciousness. You will see everything, and hear everything. And then I shall come to your house, and gradually you will regain your normal state." So the disciple followed the teacher's instructions. He lay on his bed like a dead person, and the house was filled with loud wailing. His mother, his wife, and the others lay on the ground weeping bitterly. Just then a Brahmin entered the house and said to them, "What's the matter with you?" "Oh, the boy is dead," they replied. The Brahmana felt the pulse and said, "How's that?" "No, he's not dead. I have a medicine that will cure him completely." But the joy of the relatives was unbounded. It seemed to them that heaven itself had come down into their house. "But," said the Brahmana, "I must tell you something else. Another person must take some of this medicine first, and then the boy must swallow the rest. But the other person will die. But I see he has so many dear relatives here. One of them will certainly agree to take the medicine. Well, I see his wife and mother. They're crying bitterly. Surely they will not hesitate to take it." Well, once the weeping stopped, all sat quiet. The mother said, "Well, this is a big family. Suppose I die. Well, then, who will look after the family?" She fell into a reflective mood. Now, the wife, who'd been crying a minute before and bemoaning her ill luck, said, "Well, he's gone the way of mortals. I have these 2 or 3 young children. Well, who will look after them if I die?" The disciple saw everything. He heard everything. And he stood up at once and said to the teacher, "Let us go, revered sir. I will follow you."
So, of course, Ramakrishna was motivating his young disciples who were destined to renounce the world. And so he would tell stories like this to inspire them. Because many times people will hesitate to join the monastic life because of family ties. And so this illustrates that sometimes those family ties are probably not as strong as you thought they were. And that people might, many times in India especially, parents weep and wail when their children join a monastery, even though they may have several other children. In the United States, it may not be that way. They may not have so many children. But even so, in India, they weep and wail that their child has decided to join the monastery. So Sri Ramakrishna would motivate those that were had those tendencies to become monastics in this way, so that they would not get swayed by relatives who might try to change their mind, which many times they would follow them to the monastery and try to talk them out of it and so forth. There are several stories reported in the literature of the direct disciples of how incidences like that would happen, and some of the swamis would have to deal with these distraught relatives. All right, let's read the next one.
This is entitled, None Will Follow Thee After Death. The disciple said to his guru that his wife loved him very much, and so he could not renounce the world. The disciple used to practice Hatha Yoga. And to convince him of the hollowness of his plea, the guru taught him some secrets of this branch of yoga. One day, all of a sudden, there was a great consternation in the disciple's house, and wailings and sobbings were heard all around. The neighbors came running to the house and saw the disciple in a room quite motionless, in a peculiar, convoluted posture. They all thought that life was extinct in the body. The wife of the disciple was crying, "Oh, alas, where have you gone, dear? Why have you forsaken us? We never knew that such a calamity would befall us." In the meantime, the relatives brought a cot to take the corpse out for cremation. Then they found themselves face to face with a very serious difficulty. If the man was in a contorted posture, his body would not come out through the door. And seeing that, well, one of his neighbors brought an axe and began to cut the wooden frame of the door. Till then, the wife was weeping in an uncontrollable fit of sorrow. But no sooner did she hear the sound of the axe, she ran to the spot. And though still weeping, anxiously inquired, "What are you doing?" One of the neighbors told her that they were cutting the door, as her husband's body could not otherwise be taken out because of this peculiar posture. And she cried out, "Oh, no, don't do so now. I've been widowed, and there's none to look after me. I have to bring up my fatherless children. If you now cut the door, it cannot be repaired again." Whatever was to happen has happened to my husband. You better cut his hands and legs, then take him out. Hearing this, the Hatha Yoga at once stood up, the effect of the drug having gone by this time, and he bawled out, "Woman, you want to cut my hands and legs?" So saying, he went away with his guru and renounced hearth and home.
Yeah, so no further comment needs to be made. This is a very similar sentiment to the previous parable, and told for the same reasons. All right, let's read. Today's imitation is tomorrow's inspiration.
A thief entered the palace of a king in the dead of night. He overheard the king saying to the queen, "I shall get my daughter in marriage to one of those sadhus, a holy man, dwelling there on the bank of the river." The thief thought within himself, "Well, here's good luck for me. I will go sit among the sadhus tomorrow, disguise myself as a sadhu." And perchance, well, who knows, I may succeed in getting the king's daughter. So the next day he did just that. Now when the king's officers came soliciting the sadhus to marry the king's daughter, none of them consented to it. At last they came to the thief, who was disguised like the sadhus. He made the same proposal to him. The thief kept quiet. The officers went back and told the king that there was a young sadhu who might be influenced to marry the princess. But there was no other who would consent. But the king then came to the sadhu in person, and earnestly entreated him to honor him by accepting the hand of his daughter. The heart of the thief was changed at the king's visit. He started to think, I've only assumed the garb of a sadhu. Behold, the king comes to me and is entreating me. Who can say what better things may not be in store for me if I become a real sadhu? These thoughts so strongly affected him that instead of marrying under false pretenses, he began to mend his ways. And from that very day, he exerted himself to become a true sadhu. He did not marry, and ultimately he became one of the most pious ascetics of his day. So you see that the counterfeiting of a good thing sometimes leads to unexpected good results.
Yeah, so that's a nice story. One wonders why the king thought any of the sadhus would be interested in marrying. But that seems a little peculiar. If you're going to try to find a husband for your daughter, I wouldn't look among the sadhus along the river. That would not be my first place to look. So one wonders the intelligence of the king. But that's not the point of the story, of course. The point of the story is that if one pretends, sometimes that becomes a reality. And of course, that's one of the common catchphrases of some of the swamis. They'll tell you that today's imagination is tomorrow's realization. And that's really what we're doing in meditation. We're affirming that we are one with the Absolute, we're one with Brahman, we're one with Satchitananda, that our true nature is divine, and so forth and so on. So by constantly affirming that, even though we haven't yet realized it, but by affirming that we have, and that is the reality, eventually that does become the reality. And of course, people that will preach positive thinking in more practical ways will often tell you that as well, that you have to visualize yourself being successful or being healthy or whatever it is. So if you go to, say, a Science of Mind church or something like that, or some of these New Age seminars of success and so forth, they'll tell you to imagine that you are the way you want to be, and eventually that is what you will become. So that's somewhat similar to this. All this person started to realize this in a negative way. He was doing it under false pretenses, not because he wanted to be a sadhu, but the message is the same. It's that if you pretend something, eventually you can become that. So we want to do that in a spiritual way right from the start. Of course, there are a couple of examples where people have played the part of spiritual people in plays or movies and so forth, and then have renounced the world and become monastic members. So that does happen, even in Hollywood. All right, so let's look at the next one. Simulation of holiness may become a stimulation for it. So it's going to be a similar idea. These are arranged by topic, so we can expect them all to have a similar story. All right.
One night a fisherman went into a garden. He cast his net into the lake in order to steal some fish. The owner heard him and surrounded him with his servants. They brought lighted torches and began to search for him. In the meantime, the fisherman smeared his body with ashes and sat under a tree. He was pretending to be a holy man. Now, the owner and his men searched a great deal, but could not find the thief. All they saw was a holy man covered with ashes, meditating under a tree. Next day, the news spread in the neighborhood that a great sage was staying in the garden. People gathered there, saluted him with offerings, fruits, flowers, and sweets. Many also offered silver and copper coins. How strange, thought the fisherman. I'm not a genuine holy man. Still, people show such devotion to me. I shall certainly realize God if I become a true sadhu. Well, there's no doubt about it.
So again, the same kind of moral to the story. If you pretending to be a holy person, you might actually discover that that's something very desirable and continue to pursue that path with genuineness. Now, of course, you don't want to fall into the trap of just always pretending. Then that's obviously a great downfall, which does happen. Some people pretend to be great spiritual beings so that people will be devoted to them, but then they simply take advantage of that position and they're not really seriously pursuing their spiritual life. So that's a great danger. But in these parables, it has the opposite effect. The person realizes that there's a great benefit and of being a sadhu, a sannyasin, or a holy person, and they decide to take that up as a genuine course of action, and to not continue the pretending mode. Okay, equal vision is the first and last sign of renunciation.
Before we go on, may I make a comment?
Yes.
On what you said earlier about movie stars?
Yes, you know the particulars better than I.
Right. There was a very well-known actress, I think it was in the 60s, by the name of Dolores Hart. And she was quite popular in several films. And then she played Sister Claire in a film on Francis of Assisi. And shortly after that, she joined the convent. And unlike some that we read about who go into convent but they come out, she stayed, and she's now a Mother Superior of her convent in New England. I would just mention that.
Yeah, thank you.
Equal vision is the first and last sign of renunciation. The husband and wife renounced the world, and together they undertook a pilgrimage to various holy shrines. Once, as they were walking along a road, the husband, being a little ahead of the wife, saw a piece of diamond on the road. Immediately began to scratch the ground to hide the diamond in it, thinking that if his wife saw it, perchance she might be moved to avarice, thus lose the merit of renunciation. While he was thus scratching the ground, the wife came up and asked him, just what are you doing? Well, he gave her an evasive reply. She, however, finding out the diamond and reading his thoughts, said, why did you leave the world if you still feel the distinction between the diamond and dust?
Of course, yes, Ramakrishna was famous With that, he would take a piece of mud and a piece of a coin and say, well, they're just the same, and throw them both into the Ganges. So he continued that same-sidedness. Now, this man did not have the degree of same-sidedness to think that his wife would also have that degree of same-sidedness. So you might forgive him for that. He might not realize that his wife would have the same feelings that he did, but she's taking it the opposite way, that he's not really seeing the sameness in all things, that he's still realizing that the diamond is very valuable, and so he's going to hide it. And so the idea of renunciation is to have a same-sidedness for things in the world. All right, let's see. All right, shall we read hard are the rules for a sannyasi?
The rules for a sannyasi are extremely hard. You cannot have the slightest contact with woman and gold. He must not accept money with his own hands, and he must not even allow it to be left near him. Atmavidyananda, my wife, a Vedantist, used to come here. Came here very often. One day he saw a dirty sheet on my bed. Now you have to remember this is Ramakrishna talking. He saw a dirty sheet on my bed and said, I shall invest 10,000 rupees in your name, and the interest will enable you to pay your expenses. The moment he uttered these words, I fell unconscious, as if struck by a stick. Regaining consciousness, I said to him, if you utter such words again, you'd better not come here. It's impossible for me to touch money. It's also impossible for me to keep it near me. But he was a very clever fellow, and he said, then you too have the idea of acceptance and rejection. In that case, you haven't attained perfect knowledge. My dear sir, I said, I haven't gone that far. Atmavidyananda then wanted to leave the money with Hridoy. I said to him, that will not do. If you leave it with Hridoy, then I shall instruct him to spend it as I wish. If he does not comply, I shall be angry. The very contact of money is bad. I have it here.
You missing?
Something happened.
No, you can't leave it with Hridoy. Won't an object kept near a mirror be reflected in it? So this is the last line. For some reason, you're missing that last line. Of course, Sri Ramakrishna was quite an exceptional case. And of course, even the direct disciples, one of them had to be treasurer, just like I am, and had to manage the finances of the entire monastery. Others would go out soliciting funds for the magazine publications or to support holy mothers and build the Udbodhan house and so forth. So Sri Ramakrishna was an exceptional example. All right. Do you have Baharupi impersonating Shiva? Do you have that one? Okay.
What happened?
Okay. A Baharupi is a professional impersonator. Okay.
Maharupi disguised himself as Shiva and visited a house. The master of the house wanted to give him a rupee, but he did not accept it. Then the mendicant went home and removed his disguise. He came back to the gentleman and asked for the rupee. Why didn't you accept it before? He was asked. He said, well, I was impersonating Shiva. a sannyasi. And I couldn't touch money at that time.
So, playing a part like that really does affect you. I mean, some of us here have had the privilege of being in some plays, and and I used to get to play the part of Shiva at Shivaratri, and it's really a wonderful experience to put your whole mind in that mood. And as the makeup artist is making you up, you feel like you're being transformed into Shiva for the time being, and your consciousness does really change. Or if you're in a play and you're playing the part of Jesus or one of the disciples of Jesus or something like that, your consciousness does shift. You have to really put yourself in that perspective. Of course, we often try to do that in our meditation. We'll try to picture ourselves in one of the scenes from the Gospel, or one of the scenes from the Bible, or one of the scenes from one of the Puranic texts, or whatever. And that can be a type of meditation. But if you're actually in a dramatic performance, it's much more real, and it's in some sense easier to put your whole mind into that mood. All right, hold hard your spade.
One time there was a drought in a certain part of the country. The farmers began to cut long channels to bring water to their fields. One farmer was stubbornly determined. He took a vow that he would not stop digging until the channel connected his field with the river. He set to work. Time came for his bath. His wife sent their daughter to give him some oil. "Father," said the girl, "it's already late. Rub your body with oil and take your bath." "Go away," thundered the farmer. "I have too much to do now." It was past midday. The farmer was still at work in his field. He didn't even think of his bath. Then his wife came and said, "Why haven't you taken your bath? The food's getting cold. You overdo everything. You can finish the rest tomorrow, or even today after dinner." The farmer scolded her furiously and ran at her with a spade in hand. "What? You know sense? There's no rain. The crops are dying. What will the children eat? Or you'll starve to death. I have taken a vow not to think of bath and food today before I bring water to my field." The wife saw his state of mind and ran away in fear. Through a whole day's back-breaking labor, the farmer managed by evening to connect his field with the river. And he sat down, watched the river flowing into his field with a murmuring sound. And his mind was filled with peace and joy. And he went home and he called his wife and said to her, "Now give me some oil and prepare a smoke." And with serene mind, he finished his bath and meal, retired to bed, where he snored to his heart's content. The determination he showed is an example of strong renunciation. But now there was another farmer who was also digging a channel to bring water to his field. His wife too came to the field and said to him, "It's very late, come home. It's not necessary to overdo things." But the farmer did not protest much, put aside his spade and said, "Well, I'll go home since you asked me to." Now, that man could never succeed in irrigating his field. That's the case of mild renunciation.
And I'm sure we've all experienced how when we are really determined to complete a task, we don't think of other things. We can go without meals and we can skip answering the phone and answering emails and looking at social media. We just keep our mind completely focused on the task to get the task done. And if you can do that, then you can be successful at completing the task. And of course, students really have to learn this. If they're going to be a successful student, they have to be able to completely focus on their studies when it's time to focus on their studies. They can't decide, oh, maybe I'll do it a little later, or maybe I'll take a nap, or maybe I'll go to a movie first and relax. And then pretty soon they don't have enough time to finish all their studies. And it's the same thing with our spiritual life. We can't just keep putting it off. We have to get to work and have determination in finishing it. Now, it's not going to be done in a day like hoeing the trough for the water, so we can't go without food and water and so forth and bathing until we realize God, although I guess Buddha took that approach. But most of us are still going to have to continue with some daily things in life, but we do need to keep that kind of determination in our mind so that we can complete the task. All right. As you go from near to nearer.
A Muslim, while saying his prayer, shouted, "O Allah! O Allah!" Another person said to him, "You're calling on Allah. That's all right. Why are you shouting like that? Don't you know that he hears the sound of the anklets on the feet of an ant?" When the mind is united with God, one sees him very near in one's own heart. But you must remember one thing. The more you realize this unity, the farther your mind is withdrawn from worldly things. There's a story of Vilvamangal in the Bhaktamala. He used to visit a prostitute. One night he was very late in going to her house. He'd been detained at home by the Shraddha ceremony of his father and mother. In his hands, he was carrying the food offered in the ceremony to feed his mistress. His whole soul was so set upon the woman that he was not at all consciousness of his movements. He did not even know how he was walking. And there was a yogi seated on the path, meditating on God with his eyes closed. And Vilvamangal stepped on him. The yogi became angry and cried out, "What? Are you blind? I've been thinking of God, and you step on my body?" "Oh, I beg your pardon," said Vilvamangal, "but may I ask you something? I've been unconscious thinking of a prostitute, and you're conscious of the outer world, though thinking of God. Now, what kind of meditation is that?" And in the end, Vilvamangal renounced the world, and he went away in order to worship God. He said to his mistress, "You are my guru. You've taught me how one should yearn for God." And he addressed her as his mother. He gave her up.
You know, anytime you have to practice concentration on a topic to the exclusion of anything else, you are exercising your mental capacities. So even, for example, back to the student who practices great concentration on his studies, or if you're working on a thesis trying to crack a new problem or develop a new theory, this intense concentration on that project is developing your powers of concentration. And of course, that's the secret of karma yoga too. Whenever you're doing your work, try to concentrate fully on the work that you're doing. to develop your powers of concentration, so that when you do sit for meditation, those powers of concentration have already been developed, and all you have to do is transfer it to a new object, the object of your spiritual realization. And so that's what Vilvamangal did. He transferred his one-pointed thinking about his prostitute to one-pointed thinking about God. And so that's really the moral of this story, is that you need to practice one-pointed thinking so that can be applied to your spiritual life. All right, we have time probably for one more. This one's not, maybe even two. This one's not too long. The King and the Pundit.
There was a king you used daily to hear the Bhagavata recited by a pundit. Every day after explaining the sacred book, the pundit would say to the king, "Now, O king, have you understood what I said?" Every day the king would reply, "You better understand it first yourself." And the pundit would return home and think, "Well, why does the king talk to me that way day after day? I explained the text to him so clearly. He says to me, you better understand it first yourself. Now, what does he mean?" The pundit used to practice spiritual discipline. A few days later, he came to realize that God alone is real. Everything else, house, family, wealth, friends, name, and fame, are illusory. Convinced of the unreality of the world, he renounced it. As he left home, he asked a man to take this message to the king. "O king, I now understand."
So just simply thinking about scriptures and being able to repeat them and explain them is not the same as realizing God. They can be a useful and necessary step to it, but it's not the end result. And the king apparently was already wise, as some kings were in those days, and knew what spiritual realization was, and knew that the pundit was simply expounding on scriptures without having really realized the truth of God and the unreality of the world. So that was the message of this king to this pundit. Don't just get stuck in your scholarship, but apply it and realize the truth for yourself. Well, the next one's quite short. Let's go ahead and read it.
This is entitled, "Even If You Wish to Renounce the World." Man cannot renounce the world even if he wishes, because he is thwarted by the karmas that are bearing fruit in the present birth, and by the impressions of previous actions left on the mind. Once a yogi asked a king to sit down near him and meditate upon God. To him the king replied, "Oh no, sir, that cannot be. I can remain near you, but still the thirst for worldly enjoyment will be with me. And if I remain in this forest, perhaps there will arise a kingdom within it, and that I am still destined to enjoy."
Yeah, we're all faced with these kinds of dilemmas. Our old samskaras tend to give us tendencies that are overwhelmingly compelling sometimes. So really, I think the trick is to be like a martial artist. You know, a martial artist uses the energy of their opponent to their advantage. So you have to learn to use what kinds of samskaras you have and what tendencies you have, and turn them around so that they become part of your spiritual practice. And of course, that's the secret of karma yoga, is that whatever you find yourself doing, you have to turn that into a spiritual practice. Not all of us are suited to sitting in meditation for hours at a stretch, and we are either impelled or called upon to do all sorts of various activities in the world. We have to make sure that those activities that we're doing are part of our spiritual practice, that we think of them as being offered to the Lord. If we're in some sort of occupation where we're serving somebody, then we can think that we're serving God in the people that we're serving. Or there are all sorts of things. It's a whole lecture in itself just to go through all the different kinds of ways you can turn various occupations into a spiritual practice. All right, so let's close for now, and we'll meet again next week. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.